Sergeant Marcus Chen had seen enough alien worlds to know when something was wrong. The crystalline spires of Zephyria Prime stretched endlessly into the violet sky, their surfaces humming with an energy that made his teeth ache even through his combat armor's filters. His squad of 12 had been sent to establish diplomatic contact with the Zephyrian Empire, but the silence that greeted them felt like a held breath before a scream. Reading massive energy signatures ahead, "Sarge," whispered Corporal Hayes, her scanner painting ghostly blue patterns across her visor. "Whatever's in that central spire, it's putting out more power than a fusion reactor." Marcus nodded, checking his weapon's charge level for the third time in 10 minutes. The human expeditionary force had traveled 8 months through hyperspace to reach this system, following intercepted transmissions that suggested the Zephyrians possessed technology that could revolutionize human civilization. What they hadn't expected was to find every outer settlement completely abandoned, with signs of hasty evacuation everywhere. The approach to the central spire revealed the first signs of life they'd encountered. Massive crystalline beings, roughly humanoid but translucent and towering nearly 3 meters tall, moved with fluid grace between the structures. Their movements created musical tones that resonated through the air, a haunting symphony that seemed to communicate meaning beyond human comprehension. "They've seen us," reported Private Morrison from point position. 3 of them approaching. "They don't appear to be armed, but those crystal formations on their arms are glowing." Marcus raised his hand, signaling the squad to hold position. First contact protocols were clear, but every instinct honed by years of combat was screaming warnings. The Zephyrians approached with movements too smooth, too coordinated. Like dancers following an ancient choreography, the lead Zephyrian stopped precisely 10 meters away and spoke in perfect, unaccented English. "Human warriors, you will follow. The Queen requires your presence immediately." The translator unit on Marcus's belt remained silent. These beings were speaking English naturally, which should have been impossible. No previous contact had been established. No cultural exchange programs existed. Yet here they were, communicating as if they'd studied human language for decades. "How do you know our language?" Marcus called out, keeping his rifle lowered but ready. "Time moves differently for those who see beyond the single dimension you inhabit," the Zephyrian replied cryptically. "Your arrival was anticipated. The Queen has been waiting." The journey to the central spire's heart took them through corridors that defied physics. Walls curved impossibly, creating spaces that seemed larger inside than outside. Marcus's squad maintained formation, but he could see the strain on their faces as their minds tried to process geometry that simply didn't make sense. The throne room, when they finally reached it, stole what remained of their composure. The space was vast beyond measurement, filled with floating crystal formations that pulsed with inner light. At the center, on a throne carved from a single massive crystal, sat the Zephyrian Queen. She was beautiful and terrible, standing nearly 4 meters tall with crystal formations that grew from her skull like a crown. Her body was translucent, revealing swirling patterns of energy that moved like living galaxies beneath her skin. When she turned her attention to them, Marcus felt as though he was being examined by something far older and more intelligent than human civilization itself. "So," the Queen said, her voice resonating with harmonics that made the air itself sing, "the young species finally arrives. You carry such interesting energies within your crude flesh." Marcus stepped forward, removing his helmet as protocol demanded when addressing foreign royalty. "Your Majesty, I am Sergeant Marcus Chen of the Human Expeditionary Force. We come seeking peaceful contact and potential alliance between our peoples." The Queen's laugh was like crystal bells in a storm. "Alliance? You understand so little, small warrior. Your species bleeds energy signatures that we have been tracking across the galaxy. Do you know what makes humans unique among the thousands of species we have encountered? I'm afraid I don't understand, Your Majesty. You burn so brightly, yet you contain it all within those fragile organic shells." The Queen rose from her throne, and Marcus realized that she wasn't standing on solid ground but floating effortlessly. "Your armor, warrior. Remove it, all of it. I would see what manner of star burns within human flesh." Every combat instinct screamed against the order. Armor was life in hostile environments, protection against the unknown. But something in the Queen's tone suggested this wasn't a request but a command that carried consequences for refusal. "Your Majesty, our armor provides life support in alien environments. Without it, you will not die, human. I have analyzed your biology. Your crude atmospheric requirements are easily met within my domain. The Queen's eyes, like captured starlight, fixed on him with uncomfortable intensity. But know this, warrior of Earth. What I am about to show you will change your understanding of what your species truly represents in this galaxy. Marcus looked back at his squad. Hayes gave him a slight nod, her hand moving to her weapon. Morrison's scanner was working overtime, trying to analyze threats that didn't register on any known frequency. The others maintained discipline, but he could see the questions in their eyes. If I comply, Marcus said carefully, what happens to my squad? They will witness what their sergeant has the courage to reveal, or they will watch him die as a coward. The choice, as always with humans, is yours. The throne room fell silent except for the musical harmonics that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Marcus felt the weight of decision pressing down on him like a physical force. Every piece of training told him this was a trap, a way to make him vulnerable. But something deeper, some instinct he couldn't name, suggested that refusing would be far more dangerous than complying. He reached for his armor's release mechanism, knowing that whatever happened next would determine not just his fate, but potentially the future relationship between humanity and a civilization that seemed to understand far more about his species than they understood about themselves. The first seal released with a soft hiss of escaping atmosphere, and the Queen's expression shifted to something that might have been anticipation. Behind him, his squad tensed, ready for anything except what was about to unfold. The armor pieces fell away one by one, each release echoing through the vast throne room with mechanical precision. Marcus felt exposed in ways that went beyond mere physical vulnerability. The Queen's crystalline eyes tracked every movement, studying him with the intensity of a scientist examining a rare specimen. When the last piece of armor hit the crystal floor with a metallic clang, Marcus stood in his basic environmental suit, feeling smaller than he had since boot camp. But the Queen's reaction was nothing he could have anticipated. She froze. Not the casual pause of someone collecting their thoughts, but a complete, absolute stillness that seemed to stop time itself. The energy patterns beneath her translucent skin ceased their constant motion. The musical harmonics that filled the throne room cut off as if someone had severed a connection. Even the floating crystal formations around them stopped their gentle rotation. Marcus exchanged glances with Hayes, who had her hand on her sidearm. The silence stretched for nearly a full minute before the Queen spoke again, and when she did, her voice carried undertones of something that sounded remarkably like fear. Impossible, she whispered, the word carrying harmonics that made the crystal walls resonate. Your energy signature. It cannot be, Your Majesty. Marcus took a cautious step forward. Is everything all right? The Queen's head snapped toward him with movements too fast for something so large. Do not move, human. Do not speak. Do not think too loudly. By the ancient crystals, what have you brought to my realm? Behind Marcus, his squad shifted nervously. Morrison's scanner was going wild, displaying readings that fluctuated between 0 and numbers so high they exceeded the device's ability to calculate. Hayes whispered into her comm unit, Command, we have a situation here. The alien leader appears to be experiencing some kind of distress. Cancel that transmission, the Queen commanded, her voice now carrying authority that seemed to press against their minds. Your communication devices will not function while I process what I am seeing. True to her word, every piece of electronic equipment in the squad went dark simultaneously. Weapons, scanners, communications, even the basic life support indicators on their suits. They weren't dead, but they were effectively cut off from everything except the most basic functions. Your Majesty, Marcus said carefully, if I've done something to offend or threaten you, that wasn't my intention. Perhaps if you could explain what you're seeing. Explain? The Queen's laugh was bitter and sharp like breaking crystal. How does one explain the impossible to a species that hasn't yet learned to see beyond their own limited perceptions? She descended from her floating position, touching down on the crystal floor for the first time since they'd entered the throne room. Up close, Marcus could see that her entire body was trembling, a fine vibration that created a constant low-frequency hum. Every species in this galaxy burns with life energy, she began, circling him slowly. Most burn dimly, their energies contained and predictable. Some burn brightly but briefly, like supernovas that consume themselves. Others burn with cold efficiency, lasting eons but producing little heat. Marcus remained still, letting her circle him like a predator examining prey. And humans? Humans. The Queen paused directly in front of him. Humans burn with an energy signature we have only seen once before in our recorded history. An energy that belongs to beings we thought were extinct for over 1,000,000 years. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. You're saying we're related to some ancient species? Related? The Queen's expression shifted into what might have been bitter amusement on a human face. Child of Earth, you are not related to them. According to every energy reading I can take, you are them. The throne room fell silent except for the sound of 12 humans breathing and one crystalline being trying to process an impossibility. Hayes broke the silence first. Sarge, that's gotta be some kind of mistake. Humans evolved on Earth. We have the fossil records, the genetic evidence, everything that proves our origin. The Queen turned her attention to Hayes, and the corporal took an involuntary step backward. Your species has many beliefs about your origins, young warrior. But energy signatures do not lie. They cannot be faked, copied, or altered. What I see before me is the same energy pattern carried by the beings we called the Primarchs. Who were the Primarchs? Marcus asked. The first, the Queen said simply. The species that seeded life throughout this galaxy, before they vanished into the void beyond space. Every civilization we know of carries traces of their influence in their genetic coding, their technology, their cultural development. But only traces, faint echoes of their passing. She gestured toward Marcus with one crystal in hand. You carry their full signature. Not an echo, not a trace, but the complete energy pattern of beings who could reshape reality with their will alone. Morrison's voice was shaky when he spoke. Ma'am, are you saying that humans are these Primarch things? Because with all due respect, we can't reshape reality. We can barely manage interstellar travel. That, the Queen said, is what frightens me most of all. She moved to one of the floating crystal formations and placed her hand against its surface. Immediately, images began playing in the air before them. Holographic recordings of impossible clarity. They showed beings that looked remarkably human, but surrounded by energies that bent space and time around them. Cities that floated in open space without life support. Ships that traveled between stars instantaneously. The Primarchs possessed abilities that made them essentially gods by any reasonable measure. The Queen continued. They could manipulate matter at the quantum level, travel between dimensions, even influence the flow of time itself. Their disappearance left a void in galactic civilization that we have been trying to fill for 1,000,000 years. The images shifted, showing what appeared to be a great war, beings of incredible power facing something dark and terrible that seemed to consume light itself. The battle raged across multiple star systems before ending abruptly when the Primarchs simply left. They didn't die, the Queen explained. They withdrew from this dimension entirely, leaving behind only empty worlds and the species they had guided toward sentience. Until now, we believed they were gone forever. Marcus stared at the images, seeing faces that could have belonged to any human city on Earth. But if we're the same species, why don't we have these abilities? Why don't we remember any of this? The Queen's energy patterns, which had been chaotic since his armor removal, suddenly stabilized into something that looked almost like resignation. That warrior of the sleeping gods is the question that will determine the fate of every civilization in this galaxy. Are you Primarchs who have somehow forgotten their nature? Or are you something else entirely, wearing their faces and carrying their energy but lacking their wisdom? She turned away from the holographic display and faced him directly. Because if you are truly Primarchs awakening to your heritage, then this galaxy faces either salvation or destruction. And I am no longer certain which would be worse. The weight of revelation settled over the throne room like a heavy blanket. Marcus felt as though the ground beneath his feet had shifted, leaving him standing on the edge of an abyss he couldn't see the bottom of. Around him, his squad struggled to process what they'd heard. Your Majesty, Marcus said finally, assuming what you're telling us is true, what does this mean for humanity? For the galaxy? The Queen moved to another crystal formation, this one darker than the others, its surface seeming to absorb light rather than emit it. To understand that, you must know what happened to the Primarchs, why beings with godlike power simply vanished from existence. New images formed in the air, these ones harder to look at directly. They showed the same human-like beings, but now they were different somehow. Their energy signatures were wrong, corrupted, twisted into patterns that hurt to perceive. The Primarchs' greatest strength became their greatest weakness, the Queen continued. Their ability to manipulate reality at will came with no inherent limitations, no natural boundaries. Over millennia, some of them began to lose the distinction between what was real and what they willed to be real. The holographic display showed cities that existed in impossible geometries, where up and down had no meaning, and time flowed in circles. Beings who had reshaped themselves into forms that defied physics, becoming living contradictions that should not have been able to exist. They called it the madness of infinite possibility, the Queen explained. When you can remake reality with a thought, how do you maintain any sense of what reality should be? How do you hold on to sanity when the laws of physics are merely suggestions you can choose to ignore? Hayes stepped forward, her training warring with the impossibility of what she was seeing. Ma'am, are you saying they went insane from having too much power? Worse than insane, young warrior. They became something that existed outside the normal framework of reality itself, and when that happened, they began to threaten the very foundations of existence in this dimension. The images shifted again, showing the same dark war they'd seen before, but now from a different perspective. The enemy the Primarchs fought wasn't an external threat, but members of their own species who had fallen to the madness. Reality itself seemed to be unraveling around them as the corrupted Primarchs reshaped everything according to their twisted desires. The remaining sane Primarchs faced an impossible choice, the Queen said softly. They could not destroy their corrupted brothers without using the same powers that had driven them mad. But they could not allow the madness to spread and consume all of reality. Marcus watched the holographic battle with growing horror. What did they do? They chose exile. All of them, corrupted and sane alike. They withdrew from this dimension entirely, sealing themselves away in a space between realities where their power could not affect the normal universe. It was the ultimate sacrifice, giving up everything to preserve existence itself. The images faded, leaving them in the soft crystal light of the throne room. The Queen's energy patterns had stabilized, but they carried undertones of something that might have been grief. For 1,000,000 years, we have lived in the shadow of that sacrifice, she continued. Every advanced civilization in this galaxy carries genetic markers left by the Primarchs. We are all their children in some sense, but we are children who grew up after our parents abandoned us to save us from themselves. Morrison's voice was barely above a whisper. And now you're saying we might be them? Coming back? That is the question that terrifies me, the Queen admitted. Are you Primarchs who have somehow returned but forgotten their nature? Descendants who carry their full power but none of their memories? Or something else entirely? Marcus felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the crystal throne room's temperature. What would it mean if we are them? If you are truly Primarchs, then you carry within you the potential for power beyond imagination, but also the potential for the same madness that drove them into exile. The Queen's crystalline eyes fixed on him with uncomfortable intensity. Your species has already shown concerning tendencies in your brief spacefaring history. What do you mean? The Queen gestured and new images appeared. These ones Marcus recognized with a shock. They showed human colony worlds, human space stations, human ships exploring the galaxy, but they were seen from an alien perspective, through sensors that revealed energy patterns invisible to human technology. Every human settlement burns with the same energy signature, the Queen explained, but more troubling, that signature is growing stronger. With each generation, with each expansion into space, the potential power within your species increases. You are awakening to something, whether you realize it or not. The images focused on specific humans, showing energy patterns that pulsed and shifted around them. Marcus was horrified to see that some of the patterns looked disturbingly similar to the corrupted Primarchs they'd seen earlier. Some of your species are already beginning to manifest abilities beyond normal human capability, the Queen continued. Individuals who can influence probability, who have intuitive understanding of technologies they've never studied, who seem to know things they have no way of knowing. Your human authorities dismiss these as anomalies, genetic mutations, or psychological disorders. Hayes stepped closer to Marcus, her hand moving instinctively to her weapon. Sarge, remember Admiral Foster's daughter? The one who could predict hyperspace navigation routes that shouldn't have existed? Command said it was just advanced pattern recognition. Marcus did remember. There had been several incidents over the past few years. Individuals who displayed capabilities that stretched the boundaries of what human science considered possible. but they'd all been explained away as statistical anomalies or undiscovered talents. "You see the pattern," the Queen said, noting their recognition. "Your species stands at a crossroads. You are either awakening to your true nature as returned Primarchs, or you are evolving into something similar through your expansion into space and contact with alien technologies. And either possibility scares you," Marcus stated. "Terrifies me," the Queen corrected. "If you are Primarchs, then you carry within you the potential to repeat the same mistakes that nearly destroyed reality itself. If you are something new, then you are walking the same path that led to the madness of infinite possibility, but without even the benefit of the Primarch's experience to guide you." The Queen moved closer to Marcus, and he could feel the energy radiating from her crystalline form like heat from a forge. "But there is a third possibility, one that I had not considered until I saw your energy signature without the interference of your technology, which is that you are Primarchs, but Primarchs who have been deliberately limited, sealed away from your power until you could prove you have learned wisdom." The Queen's expression shifted into something that might have been hope. "Your species has something the original Primarchs lacked, something that might allow you to wield their power without falling to their madness." Marcus waited, sensing that whatever she said next would change everything. "You have learned to choose limitation voluntarily. Your entire civilization is built on the concept of accepting boundaries, following laws, respecting the rights of others even when you have the power to ignore them. Perhaps that is the key to wielding infinite power without losing your sanity." The Queen stepped back, her energy patterns shifting into configurations that Marcus's mind interpreted as deep contemplation. "But that hypothesis can only be tested one way, warrior of the sleeping gods. And the test itself may trigger the very awakening that could either save this galaxy or destroy it." The silence that followed the Queen's words was heavy with implication. Marcus felt as though he stood at the center of a cosmic scale, with the fate of not just humanity but every living being in the galaxy balanced on his next decision. "What kind of test?" he asked, though part of him already dreaded the answer. The Queen moved to the central crystal formation, placing both hands against its surface. Immediately, the entire throne room began to shift and change. The walls became transparent, revealing the vast expanse of the Zephyrian city beyond. But more than that, Marcus could suddenly see the energy patterns that flowed through everything. Streams of light connected every building, every being, every piece of technology in a vast network of interconnected power. It was beautiful and terrifying, like seeing the nervous system of a living god laid bare. "The test is simple in concept, but potentially catastrophic in execution," the Queen explained. "I must attempt to unlock the barriers that contain your true nature. If you are indeed Primarchs, this will awaken abilities that have lain dormant in your species for 1,000,000 years." Morrison's voice cracked as he spoke. "And if we're not? Then the process will likely destroy not just this human, but create a cascade effect that could kill every member of your species simultaneously." The Queen's energy patterns shifted into configurations that Marcus's mind interpreted as regret. The energy fields required to test a potential Primarch are not gentle. They probe the very foundations of existence itself. Hayes stepped forward, her weapon now openly in her hands despite its apparent uselessness. "Like hell you're experimenting on my sergeant. We didn't come here to be lab rats for some alien science project." The Queen's attention shifted to Hayes, and the corporal stumbled backward, as if hit by a physical force. "Brave warrior, your protection of your pack leader is admirable. But this choice is not yours to make. If your species is awakening to Primarch heritage, then the awakening will happen whether we test for it or not. The only question is whether it happens under controlled conditions or randomly throughout your population." New images formed in the air, showing human colonies scattered across the galaxy. But now Marcus could see the energy patterns around them, pulsing and growing stronger with each passing moment. "Your species' expansion into space has accelerated whatever process is occurring within you," the Queen continued. "Contact with alien technologies, exposure to cosmic energies, the stress of adapting to alien environments. All of this is triggering latent capabilities. Within a generation, perhaps less, some of your people will begin manifesting abilities whether they understand them or not." The images showed humans beginning to glow with the same energy signatures they'd seen around the ancient Primarchs. But these humans were clearly unprepared, their expressions showing confusion and terror as reality bent around them without their understanding or control. The madness of infinite. Possibility does not require full understanding of one's abilities, the Queen said grimly. It requires only power without wisdom, capability without restraint. Your species is approaching that threshold, and once it is crossed, there will be no returning. Marcus stared at the images, seeing faces that could belong to any human settlement. Children whose drawings became real. Engineers whose will shaped metal without tools. Farmers whose desire for rain brought storms that raged for weeks. How long do we have? He asked, unknown. The awakening could begin tomorrow or decades from now. But the pattern is accelerating with each human generation born in space. Your Admiral's daughter is not an anomaly, warrior. She is a harbinger. The Queen moved away from the crystal formation, and the images faded, leaving them once again in the soft light of the throne room. This is why your arrival here was not coincidence. My people have been monitoring human expansion, watching for signs that the sleeping gods were stirring. Your energy signature confirmed our worst fears and our greatest hopes. What do you mean? Marcus asked. If we can successfully test and awaken one human under controlled conditions, we can study the process, understand it, perhaps even find ways to guide it safely. But if we do nothing, your species will stumble blindly into powers that destroyed the greatest civilization this galaxy has ever known. Hayes lowered her weapon, though she kept it ready. And if the test fails? If it kills the Sarge? Then we will know that your species is not ready for awakening, and we can work to suppress the process until you have gained the wisdom necessary to handle such power. The Queen's energy patterns shifted into what might have been compassion, but suppressing Primarch awakening would require technologies that do not yet exist. Your people would live, but they would never reach their full potential. And if I am a Primarch? Marcus asked. If the test succeeds, then you become our teacher, the Queen said simply. You show us how humans might wield godlike power without falling to godlike madness. And perhaps together, we find a way to guide your species through the transformation that is coming whether we wish it or not. Marcus looked back at his squad, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in their faces. Morrison's scanner remained dark, but the young soldier was staring at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. Hayes maintained her defensive stance, but her eyes kept drifting to the energy patterns that still flickered around the edges of his vision. There's something else, the Queen said quietly. Something I have not yet told you. Marcus turned back to her, dreading what new revelation might come. The barriers that contain your abilities are not natural. They were placed there deliberately, woven into your species' genetic code by the original Primarchs before they entered exile. Which means your awakening is not an accident or an evolutionary development. The implications hit him like a physical blow. They planned this. The evidence suggests that the Primarchs foresaw a time when this galaxy would need their power again. They seeded your species with their abilities but locked them away until you had developed the wisdom to use them responsibly. The Queen's crystalline form seemed to pulse with inner light. Your arrival here, your willingness to risk yourself for knowledge, your squad's loyalty despite overwhelming odds, all of this suggests that the time the Primarchs prepared for has arrived. Marcus felt the weight of cosmic significance settling on his shoulders. What happens if I refuse the test? Then I will honor your choice and send you back to your people. But the awakening will come regardless, and when it does, your species will face it without preparation, without understanding, and without hope of controlling it. The Queen paused. And this galaxy will burn in the fires of uncontrolled power, just as it nearly did 1,000,000 years ago. The choice was no choice at all, and they all knew it. Marcus looked at his squad one more time, memorizing their faces in case this was the last time he saw them as the man they knew. What do you need me to do? The Queen's response to Marcus's acceptance was immediate and terrifying in its efficiency. Crystal formations throughout the throne room began to move, floating into new configurations that formed a complex geometric pattern around where he stood. The air itself seemed to thicken with energy, creating pressure waves that made his ears pop. Step into the center, the Queen commanded, her voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in his bones. And remember, warrior, once this process begins, there is no stopping it. You will either emerge as something greater than human, or you will cease to exist entirely. Marcus moved to the center of the crystal formation, feeling the energy building around him like static before a lightning strike. Behind him, his squad maintained their positions, but he could hear Hayes whispering urgent prayers and Morrison's breathing becoming rapid and shallow. Your Majesty, Marcus said, looking back at the Queen. If this goes wrong, will my people be safe? Your squad will be unharmed regardless of the outcome, she assured him. But if you are truly a Primarch and the awakening triggers a cascade effect, no one in this galaxy will be truly safe. We will all face a future none of us can predict. The crystal formations began to pulse in synchronization, creating a rhythm that seemed to match his heartbeat. Marcus felt something stirring deep within himself. Something that had been sleeping. His entire life beginning to wake up. The process will attempt to unlock genetic sequences that have been dormant in your species for over 1,000,000 years, the Queen explained as energy began to flow between the crystals. These sequences were designed by the original Primarchs to remain sealed until specific conditions were met. Conditions related to wisdom, self-control, and the ability to voluntarily accept limitation despite having unlimited power. The energy flowing around Marcus intensified, and he began to see things that shouldn't have been possible. The solid walls of the throne room became transparent, revealing not just the city beyond, but layers of reality stacked upon each other like pages in a book. He could see the past and future of the room simultaneously, ghostly images of other beings who had stood in this same place across millennia of time. Do not fight the visions, the Queen warned. They are memory fragments embedded in the crystalline structure, recordings of every being who has undergone this process. Learn from what they show you. The visions intensified, and Marcus found himself experiencing memories that were not his own. He saw the original Primarchs at the height of their power, beings who could reshape matter with their thoughts and travel between stars with a gesture. But he also saw their gradual corruption, the way unlimited power slowly eroded their connection to reality itself. One particular memory stood out with crystal clarity. A Primarch who looked remarkably like himself, standing in what might have been an early version of this same throne room. But this being was different, wrong somehow. His eyes held the cold fire of madness, and reality bent and twisted around him in patterns that hurt to perceive. I can remake this entire galaxy, the mad Primarch was saying to a younger version of the Queen. I can eliminate suffering, death, limitation itself. Why do you resist such paradise? Because paradise built on the denial of natural law is no paradise at all, the Queen replied, her voice heavy with sorrow. You have forgotten what it means to be real, Ancient One. You exist now only in the spaces between reality and dream. The memory faded, replaced by another. This time, Marcus saw what he somehow knew were the final moments of the Primarch civilization. The same beings, but now clearly divided into two factions. Those who remained sane faced off against those who had fallen to the madness. But both groups carried power that could unmake existence itself. We cannot fight them without becoming them, one of the sane Primarchs was saying. To use our full power against them would risk the same corruption that claimed them. Then we choose exile, another responded. All of us, sane and mad alike. We remove ourselves from this reality before our conflict destroys everything that exists. Marcus watched as the Primarchs opened what could only be described as a wound in reality itself. A gateway to someplace between dimensions where their power could not affect the normal universe. One by one they stepped through, each departure dimming the galaxy's energy signature until only ordinary species remained. But in the final moments, he saw something else. The last Primarch to leave, the one who sealed the dimensional gateway behind them, paused to perform one final act. With careful precision, he wove new genetic patterns into the developing life forms scattered across the galaxy, but especially into one particular species on a small blue world in an unremarkable star system. When the time comes, this final Primarch said, his words somehow reaching across 1,000,000 years to speak directly to Marcus. Remember that power without wisdom is the path to madness, but wisdom without power is the path to extinction. Your species will need both to face what is coming. The vision ended abruptly as the crystal formation around Marcus reached full activation. Energy flowed through him like liquid fire, probing every cell of his body, every neural pathway in his brain, every strand of DNA in his genetic code. He felt layers of restriction being peeled away like old bandages, revealing capabilities that had been locked away since birth. The first change was in his perception. The energy patterns that flowed through all living things became as visible as physical matter. He could see the complex web of connections that linked every being in the throne room, the galaxy beyond, and something even larger that stretched between the stars themselves. The second change was in his understanding. Knowledge flooded his mind, not learned but remembered. He understood the fundamental forces that held reality together and how they could be influenced. He grasped concepts of space and time that human science had never even imagined. Most importantly, he understood exactly how dangerous this knowledge was. The third change was in his capability. With a thought, he could have reshaped the crystalline formations around him. With a gesture, he could have traveled instantaneously to any point in the galaxy. With concentrated will, he could have rewritten the basic laws of physics in a localized area. The power was intoxicating, seductive, and absolutely terrifying. But along with the power came something else. Something the original Primarchs had apparently lacked. The memory of choosing to put on armor every morning, knowing it limited his mobility but kept him alive. The habit of following orders even when he disagreed with them, because discipline was more important than personal preference. The instinct to protect his squad even at the cost of his own safety, because some things mattered more than individual survival. By the ancient crystals, the Queen whispered, her energy patterns shifting into configurations Marcus now recognized as awe and terror combined. You are maintaining coherence. After 1,000,000 years of exile, the Primarchs have finally learned wisdom. Marcus opened his eyes, though he hadn't realized he'd closed them. The world looked different now, layered with meaning and possibility that hadn't been there before. But beneath the cosmic awareness, he was still himself, still Sergeant Marcus Chen, still responsible for his squad, still bound by the moral framework that had shaped his entire adult life. "How do you feel?" the Queen asked, her voice careful and controlled. Marcus considered the question seriously, testing his sense of self against the vast capabilities now flowing through his consciousness. "Like I could remake the universe," he said finally, "but also like I have absolutely no right to do so." The Queen's relief was visible in every shifting pattern of her crystalline form. "Then there is hope for your species after all." The transformation was complete, but Marcus quickly realized that awakening to his true nature was only the beginning of a much larger challenge. As the crystal formations powered down and returned to their original positions, he became acutely aware of every energy signature in the throne room, the city beyond, and stretching out across the galaxy itself. His squad was staring at him with a mixture of awe and concern. To their eyes, he probably looked the same, but something in his posture or expression must have changed because Hayes had her weapon raised again. "Sarge?" she called out cautiously. "You still in there?" Marcus smiled, finding comfort in her familiar suspicion. "Still here, Hayes, though I'm seeing things a bit differently now." To demonstrate, he gestured toward Morrison's apparently dead scanner. Without touching it, he coaxed its systems back to life, repairing the damage the Queen's energy pulse had caused and improving its sensitivity by several orders of magnitude. Morrison stared at his suddenly functional equipment in disbelief. "Sir, the readings this thing is showing, according to this, you're putting out more energy than a small star." "Carefully contained energy," Marcus corrected, learning to modulate his output even as he spoke. The original Primarch's mistake wasn't having power. It was letting the power use them instead of using it responsibly. The Queen moved closer, her crystalline form now radiating what Marcus recognized as cautious optimism. "You speak of responsibility. That is encouraging. But now comes the true test of your species' worthiness. What will you do with what you have become?" It was a question Marcus had been considering since the moment his awakening completed. The scope of what he could now accomplish was staggering. With focused effort, he could terraform dead worlds, travel instantaneously across the galaxy, even manipulate the flow of time itself. But each of these capabilities came with consequences that rippled outward in ways both subtle and profound. "First," he said, "I need to understand what's happening to the rest of humanity. You said the awakening is spreading. How much time do we have before others begin manifesting these abilities?" The Queen gestured toward one of the crystal formations, which immediately displayed a real-time map of human space. Energy signatures pulsed at various points throughout the colonies, some bright and steady, others flickering and unstable. "The process has already begun," she admitted. "Your transformation appears to have triggered a resonance effect. Other humans with the genetic potential are beginning to awaken spontaneously. Most are managing the initial stages well, but a few. The display focused on a mining colony at the edge of human space, The energy signature there was chaotic, pulsing erratically in patterns that Marcus instinctively recognized as dangerous. Someone's losing control, he realized. A young engineer named David Park, the Queen confirmed. His abilities manifested suddenly 3 hours ago. He is attempting to use his power to improve the mining operations' efficiency, but without understanding the underlying principles, he is destabilizing the planet's geological structure. Marcus watched the energy patterns with growing alarm. Even from across the galaxy, he could see that the mining colony was in imminent danger. The engineer's well-intentioned but uncontrolled use of Primarch abilities was creating a cascade effect that would likely tear the planet apart within hours. "I have to help him," Marcus said, taking a step toward the throne room's exit before stopping. "But I don't even know how to get there. We came here on a ship that's in orbit and even at maximum speed. Distance is an illusion when you understand the true nature of space," the Queen said gently. "You now possess the ability to travel instantaneously to any point you can clearly visualize." But her tone became warning. "Such travel requires absolute control. A single moment of distraction or emotional instability could scatter your atoms across multiple star systems." Marcus felt his squad's eyes on him as he wrestled with the implications. He had the power to save an entire colony, but using that power required risking not just his own life, but potentially the lives of everyone on the planet he was trying to help. "There has to be another way," Hayes said firmly. "We're not leaving you to attempt some cosmic teleportation stunt by yourself." "Actually," Morrison said quietly, studying his enhanced scanner, "I think we are. Look at these energy readings. The Sarge isn't just connected to that mining colony. He's connected to every human being in the galaxy. If something goes wrong here, if he loses control like that engineer did, the implication hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus's awakened abilities were orders of magnitude more powerful than anything the engineer was displaying. If he lost control, the consequences wouldn't be limited to one planet. "Your soldier speaks wisely," the Queen said. "The burden of power is that it must often be carried alone. But perhaps there is a way to minimize the risks." She moved to the central crystal formation, placing her hands against its surface. "I can create a stabilizing field around you during the journey, a buffer that will contain any power fluctuations. But it will require you to trust me completely, to allow my consciousness to merge temporarily with yours as a safeguard." "Is that safe?" Marcus asked. "For me? Absolutely not. If you lose control while our minds are linked, I will die with you. But it is the only way to ensure that your first use of cosmic travel doesn't accidentally damage the fabric of reality itself." Marcus looked back at his squad one more time, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in their faces. They were soldiers, trained to face impossible odds and complete the mission regardless of personal cost. But this was beyond anything their training had prepared them for. "Hayes," he said finally, "I need you to get the squad back to the ship and report to command. Tell them everything that's happened here, and make sure they understand that humanity is going through a transformation that could either save the galaxy or destroy it." "Sir," Hayes replied formally, though her voice was tight with emotion, requesting permission to stay and provide support. "Denied, Corporal. What I'm about to attempt can't be helped by conventional weapons or tactics. The best thing you can do is make sure our people know what's coming and start preparing for it." He turned back to the Queen, who was already beginning the process of creating the stabilizing field. Energy flowed between her crystalline form and the surrounding formations, weaving patterns that Marcus now understood were designed to contain and channel cosmic forces safely. "Your Majesty," he said, "if this works, if we can help that engineer and prove that humans can handle these abilities responsibly, what happens next?" "Then we begin the real work," she replied, her energy patterns shifting into configurations he read as determination mixed with hope. "We teach your species to wield the power of gods without forgetting what it means to be mortal. We prepare them for the greater threats that await beyond this galaxy, and perhaps if we succeed, we find a way to contact the original Primarchs and tell them that their children have finally grown wise enough to inherit their legacy." The stabilizing field snapped into place around Marcus, and he felt the Queen's consciousness brush against his own like a gentle touch. Through her ancient memories, he glimpsed the scope of what awaited humanity if they could master their awakening abilities. Threats from other dimensions, cosmic entities that fed on entire galaxies, challenges that would require every ounce of power and wisdom they could muster. But first, they had to save one confused engineer on a distant mining world. Marcus focused on the chaotic energy signature displayed in the crystal formation, visualized the colony as clearly as he could, and took his first step into the larger universe that awaited awakened humanity. The journey across space and time took less than a heartbeat, but what he found when he arrived would determine the future of every human being alive.